which is the program we're going to be using to write our Android applications in this course. Now, just a reminder that this is the Windows video, so if you're running a Mac or a Linux machine, there's actually separate videos that you can follow along with for those operating systems. But if you're using Microsoft Windows, you're in the right place, so let's get started. Now, it's possible that you might be running a 32-bit version of Windows. And if that's the case, Android Studio won't actually run until you install the Java development kit first. Now, to check whether you have a 32-bit or a 64-bit version of Windows, we're going to come down here to the Start menu. And in search, we're going to type System Information. And open up the System Information. You may need to go into Control Panel depending on what version of Windows you're running. And once we go in there, under System Summary, there's System Type. You can see here it says x64 based PC. I'll just zoom that up so you can see that. Now if this says x64 based PC, which it does in my case, then you've got a 64-bit version of Windows, otherwise it's 32-bit. So because I've got a 64-bit version of Windows, I don't need to do anything else. I can proceed with the Android Studio installation. And that's because Android Studio now includes its own installation of Java, but only ships with a 64-bit edition. And that doesn't work on a 32-bit edition. So if you found that by doing this you got a 32-bit system showing up, then stop the video here and skip ahead to the next video. And that's going to show you how to install the Java JDK on your 32-bit Windows system. And once you follow the steps in that video, you can come back to this one and continue. Now note that this applies even if you intend programming in Kotlin. And that's because Kotlin uses the Java Virtual Machine, or JVM, so you still need to have a working JDK installed on your 32-bit system. Alright, so I'm going to presume that at this point you've fixed those issues with 32 and 64-bit. And what we want to do now is go to the website and download Android Studio. So to do that, we're going to go to developer.android.com. Now we could also have searched for Android Studio in your search engine to find the link. So you want to make sure that you are at the developer.android.com site so you know that you're installing the official Google version. You can see at the top that we're on that. Now one thing to be aware of is that the new version of Android Studio, version 3.0, is very different to the previous version and has a number of new features that weren't available in the earlier version. Things like the new layout designer, for example. So you'll need to be using Android Studio 3.0 or higher for this course. Now, if you've already got Android Studio 2.3 installed, you'll still need to install the 3.0 version for this course. And Android Studio 2.3 will update itself in the normal way, so make sure if you're running that version that you install the update when it offers it. Alright, so we're ready to do a fresh install of Android Studio 3.0 on Windows. So we're on the main page. We're going to come over here and click on Get Android Studio. We're going to click on Download Android Studio. I'm going to click on the checkbox to agree with the above terms and conditions and click on Download Android Studio for Windows. I'm going to click on Run here, just so we can see it downloading down here down the bottom. And we'll just pause the video while this actually downloads, and we'll come back and continue after the download's completed. Okay, so you can see the download's nearly finished now. Once it finishes, you should be able to run the downloaded file from your browser. Click it that way, and it's just a standard Windows installer exe file, and you'll get the usual prompt asking for confirmation that you're happy to allow it to make changes. So we'll give that a moment to run the security scan. And we can minimize the browser now, so we can see what we're doing. And Android Studio should kick in. You can see it's now come up. You may not see that other video, but I'm selecting yes here to allow this app to make changes to your device. And then we should see the standard Android Studio setup start. And click next to start the installation. And the components, I'm going to leave both of those on the default options, Android Studio and the Android virtual device. Next. I'm going to leave the default folder, which is fine for us. Program files, Android, Android Studio. Next. Click on Install. So that's now extracting the various files. So we'll just fast forward this bit and come back after the installation is completed. Now, by the way, during this process, you may or may not get an option, an error coming up saying that it needs to retry. And if that does happen, just click retry. And that's because sometimes some of these components fail installation for no apparent reason, and retrying it should fix it. Sometimes even retrying more than once. And personally, I've got no idea why. Possibly the network's a bit slow or something along those lines. But in our case, hopefully we won't get that error. Okay, you can see the installation is completed. We're going to click on Next now. And we're going to leave this checkbox on to start Android Studio and click on Finish. Now we've got this option as well to give us the option to import Android Studio settings from another location if you've got a previous installation, but in our case we haven't, so we're going to leave the default selected do not import settings and click OK. Android Studio is loading. And you can see now it's actually finding some available SDK components, and it's giving us an option now to actually go ahead and install some more of the Android Studio setup, and specifically an emulator. So click on Next. Now we can run either a standard install or a custom. Select standard, that should be right in most cases. Click on Next. You can choose the theme, which is how the display will look for you, whether you would like a darker background with different color fonts or a white background. I'm just going to leave the default. The choice is up to you. Click on Next. We've now got a list of the various application settings and also the installation settings and what it's going to download, because we've only completed the first component of the download. We need to go through and install the rest. So click on Finish, and we'll let it go through and download and install. And you can click on Show Details. It'll give you a bit of an indication as to what it's doing. Now this is the part where I said you may come up and ask you to retry, and potentially more than once if there's a problem with Google servers. Do that if it does come up, and chances are that it'll work okay. But what we'll do is we'll pause the video here and we'll come back once this is pretty well finished. Now the other thing I didn't mention is if you haven't installed Android Studio or any aspect of Android, this Android Software Development Kit, it may actually prompt you for a folder, an SDK folder. You can actually put that wherever you like, and the default is usually a good choice. In my case, because I had another product that used the Android SDK, it didn't prompt us for that. But if you do get prompted, the default location is probably fine. Now one thing though to check once this installation has completed is to make sure that Haxum was installed successfully, and that's if Haxum is able to be run on your computer. Now you may see an error that it couldn't install Haxum, and I just want to bring up a slide and show you that. So this might be an error that you'll see, unable to install Intel Haxum. And if you see that, that means you won't be able to take advantage of the Haxum acceleration features when you run your emulator. And in the next video, when we configure the SDK, you'll need to install the ARM emulators instead of the x86 ones. Now, the ARM emulator will still work, but it'll be a lot slower than an x86 emulator using Haxum. Now, it may well be worth checking that VTX is enabled in your computer's BIOS. So if that's the case, have a look at that in the videos Enable VTX in BIOS. We've actually got a video dedicated to that. And one of the main reasons that Haxum won't work is if you haven't got an Intel CPU. On Windows, the requirement for Haxum to work is that it has to be an Intel CPU, presumably because Intel have created that application that made it mandatory that only Intel CPUs will actually work. For now though, if that's the only error you get, then Android Studio and the SDK will be installed and we can continue. So let's actually just go back now to the live installation and see how that's going. Alright, you can see that we're still unzipping here. We've been downloading and we're unzipping, so the installation is still progressing. So we'll just fast forward this and come back once it's pretty much done. You can see now it's running the Intel Haxum installer. So this is the part that actually needs an Intel CPU. So again, if we're getting any errors here, we'll know that there was a problem. But in my case, you can see down the bottom, it's got Intel Haxum installed successfully. So that means that we're good to go. Alright, so we've now installed Android Studio successfully at this point. In the next video, we're going to look at configuring Android Studio. Now, the steps to configure Android Studio are largely the same regardless of which operating system you're using. So you'll want to skip over the next few videos now, because the next videos cover installing Android Studio on a Mac and Linux and installing the Java JDK on 32-bit systems. But if you've managed to install this successfully, you don't need to watch any of those. So basically the next video in that scenario that you want, development kit, which contains the software to be able to run programs in this course. Now, if you're running on a Mac or a Linux machine, you want to check out a specific video that we've created in this section of the course for those operating systems. The reason is the steps are slightly different for each platform. So this is the Windows video. So if you are on Windows, you want to start by going to java.oracle.com. And that'll bring you to a page from Oracle, which are now the owners of the Java product. I'm going to come over here to under Technologies and click on Java SE. And once that page loads, come over here and click on Downloads. And finally, once we get to that page, there's this little icon here, this little image, and it'll say Java Platform JDK and a number here. Now it's highly likely that this number will change in the future because Oracle release at regular intervals updates to the Java development kit. So if you've got a later number than that, that's fine. Just click on the graphic there, and that'll take you to the download page where we can actually download the software. Now what we need to do is determine whether your computer is a 32 or is running a 32 or 64-bit version of Windows. The reason for that is that there's two versions of the JDK available. You can see here Windows x86 and Windows x64. So what that means is Windows x86 is for computers running 32-bit version of Windows, and Windows x64 is for 64-bit version of Windows. So to find out which version you're running on your computer, you basically want to get into Control Panel, or if on Windows 10, it's Settings. So I'm going to come down here, I've clicked on the Start icon, click on Settings. Once you get into Control Panel, or in my case Windows Settings, click on System, and then there's an option down here for About. That's certainly what it is for Windows 10. It might be slightly different for older version of Windows, but there's an option on all versions of Windows to tell you what version of Windows you're running. Under here on a system type, you can see that it says 64-bit operating system. So ignore this part to the right where it says x64 based processor, because it is possible confusingly to have a 64-bit processor but to be running a 32-bit version of the Windows operating system. So the important bit here is to the left where it says 64-bit operating system. That tells me there that I'm running a 64-bit version of the operating system, and I can now choose my download. The only other option that would come up would be a 32-bit version, and once you know that, you can close that screen down. You come back to the page that we loaded previously and choose the relevant version. Now before they allow you to download, you need to click on Accept License Agreement, this little radio button that you saw me click, and now I need to choose the version. So a 32-bit version, that would be the Windows x86 version. In my case, 64 means 64-bit version or 64-bit edition of Windows, so I'm going to click on that little option there for me. So you'll choose whichever one is appropriate, and I'm going to click on Run to let Windows run this so that we can go ahead and install it. So I'll just fast forward this while it continues and completes the download. Okay, so I've gone ahead and the download's finished and it's started because I selected it to run. Now if you didn't select run, you might have to double click the downloaded program to start it, but in any event it should start. I'm going to close down the browser because we no longer need it, and you'll get a process like this, an installation process that we can actually go through. So I can come through here now and I can click on Next. Now you may actually need to know this later in the course, so just keep to the back of your mind, or perhaps write down the area or the path that this software has been installed in. You can see in my case it's going to be installed in C:\program files\Java, and then this number will relate to the version that you've downloaded. So the important part is program files/Java. So you may or may not need that later in the course, but make a mental note of that or write it down so you know. Click on Next. We don't need to change any options there. We'll let it do its thing and install. The next thing it does, it's installed the JDK, but it also wants to install the JRE. The JRE stands for the Java Runtime Edition, and you do need to have both things on your computer in order to be able to use Java. So we're going to just click on Next, noting that directory, the C:\program files/Java, so it's actually putting it in a different subfolder. And again, you may need that later in the course. Click on Next and let it do its thing again. Alright, so at this point you can see that it's come up and said the Java SE Development Kit 8 update, and then the number has been successfully installed, so we're actually done. So I can click on Using in this course to write our Android applications. Now just a reminder that this is the Mac video, so if you're running a Windows or Linux machine, then there's separate videos you can follow along with and watch for those operating systems in this section of the course. But if you're using a Mac, you're in the right place, so let's get started. Now you can install Android Studio by going to developer.android.com, or you could have typed Android Studio into your search engine to find the link. And when you get here, there's an option down here to get Android Studio, so I can click on that. Now it should recognise that you're on a Mac automatically, which it has for me, and I can click on Download Android Studio. I can agree to the terms and conditions by checking the checkbox, then click on the download button. I'm going to save this. And we'll just pause the video now till this is actually downloaded. And actually, while that's downloading, one thing to be aware of is that this new version of Android Studio, version 3.0, is very different to the previous version and has a number of new features that weren't available in that earlier version. So things like the new layout designer, for example. So you'll need to be using Android Studio 3.0 or higher for this course. Now, if you've already got Android Studio 2.3 installed, you'll still need to install the 3.0 version for this course. And Android Studio 2.3 will automatically update itself, so make sure you install the update when it's offered. Alright, so you can see that in the bottom left-hand corner, it's downloaded for me now, so I'm going to open the DMG file. So you'll navigate to the folder if you can't open it the way I have in the Chrome browser. We'll give it a moment to start up. Then to install it, we just drag the Android Studio icon over to Applications. And you can see this is actually copying into Applications. Now that we've done that, we can close down the installer and we can close down the browser. Then what I can do is just open Finder, go to Applications, and I can double click Android Studio to open it. You can see that it's verifying Android Studio, so I'll just close down the Finder while it's doing that. And we may be prompted with a security error, and if that's the case, I'll show you how to fix that. Okay, we're going to click on Open to open Android Studio after it's verified. We're going to select Do Not Import Settings, and we don't need to do that because we're not importing from a previous version of Android Studio. So click on OK. Now that security exception, you may get a security error the first time you install this, and if that's the case, I'll just show you quickly what you need to do. If you do get that security error, and you just come over here and click on and go into System Preferences. Then you go into Security and Privacy and go into General. And on this screen here, there'll be a little option that says words to the effect of, we couldn't open Android Studio into Open Anyway. And you'll click on Open Anyway from there, and that will open Android Studio for you. But in my case, I didn't get that exception, so I don't need to do it. So Android Studio went through and looked for the software development kit repository to figure out what it needs to install on your computer, or rather it downloaded it from the Google services. Then we've got this wizard. So I'm going to click on Next. And we've got an option to go into Standard or Custom. So we can just leave it on Standard and click on Next. We've got an option here to choose which theme we want to use. And that's basically the background color and color of the fonts. I'm going to leave it on the default, but if you wanted to, you could choose Darkular and get a darker looking theme, which is probably a little bit better on the eyes, but I'll stick with the default. And I'm going to click on Next. So next we've got a review of the settings and what's going to be downloaded and installed for us. So I'm going to leave everything on the defaults there and click on Finish. And then I'm going to click on Show Details, and that just shows us what's actually downloading. So what I'm going to do now is pause the video, and we'll come back once the download's complete. Now just bear in mind that the download can be quite large, depending on the components selected, and can take a significant amount of time, depending on the speed of your computer, and also the speed of your internet connection. But I'll pause the video and we'll come back once the download's complete. Alright, so the installation's been proceeding and we've got to the point now where it's running the Intel Haxum installer. So what we need to do is it's wanting me to enter my password, so I'm going to do that. That's the password to this account. Now, by the way, you may sometimes get a dialog asking you to retry at some point. If that happens, just click retry. And that's because sometimes the downloading of some components fails for no apparent reason, and retrying it should fix it. Now, sometimes it does take more than one retry, and I've got no idea why. Perhaps something to do with being a busy network at Google's end. And once this Haxum installation is finished, we just want to check to make sure that's installed. Because if there's an error with Haxum and it's not installed properly, we may see an error. And I'm just going to bring up a slide to show you the error that you may see. So you can see here that this is an error that says that it couldn't install Intel Haxum. So if you see something like that, you won't be able to take advantage of the Haxum acceleration features when you run your emulator. So in the next video, when we configure the SDK, you'll need to install the ARM emulators instead of the x86 ones. Now the emulator will still work, but will be a lot slower than an x86 emulator running Hexam. Now, modern Macs using Intel processors should have virtualization enabled, so if you get a problem, it's worth checking out this page on the Apple support site. But if that's the only error, then Android Studio and the SDK is installed, and we can continue and click Finish. But let's go back and see how the Android Studio installations proceeded. And getting back to here now, you can see it says Silent Installation Pass. So that's our confirmation that Hexam was installed correctly. We've also got everything else seemingly installed. There's no errors that we can see there. So at this point we can click on Finish. And the Android Studio 3.0 installation has actually completed. Now in the next video in this section, we're going to be looking at configuring Android Studio. So the steps from now on are largely the same regardless of which operating system you're using. So skip over the next few videos which relate to a Linux installation and installing the Java JDK on 32-bit systems. So you won't need to do that if you've successfully installed Android Studio. Basically,